Again, through you, Madam Chair, I can confirm that the driveway is not included in the permeable surface area. On the landscape plan, now this is not included in the attachments to the council report because a landscape plan was only circulated a week and a half ago prior to the VCAT hearing, so that hasn't been attached. But this does show in more detail the permeable and non-permeable surface areas. The driveway has not been included in that calculation.
Okay, so you've got the plan in front of you, which gives an outline of what's permeable and what's not, and you're confident that the calculation of 21% has been calculated from that, off that plan.
Yes, again through Madam Chair, I have checked that this afternoon. I rechecked to make sure that the calculation of 21.1% permeable surface area did not include the driveway, and I'm satisfied that they have achieved the standard without relying on the driveway.
That's good.
Yep, follow on, Mr. Councillor Brand.
Would you be able to comment on what Mr. Moritz from the property to the rear has said about the laneway there, and whether that's part of his private open space, whether it's been taken into consideration with if it is so, whether it's been taken into consideration of the impact of the proposed development and just how that plays out. It's an unusual situation, I would think.
Again, through you, Madam Chair, I can confirm that that piece of the laneway is not shown as being on Council's road register, so it's not included as being on the road register. So that's about the last 11 metres of the laneway adjacent to Mr. Moritz's property. In terms of the exact ownership, I haven't seen any title information, so I can't confirm that he owns it or someone else owns it, but I can confirm it's not Council Road. In terms of if it is, assuming that it is private open space associated with his dwelling, it's not overshadowed, or there's a very small amount of overshadowing, only less than 1 square metre at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Otherwise, it's not overshadowed. So the main impact to that would be from overlooking potentially from the balconies, assuming that they weren't screened, and obviously the views from the private open space towards the site.
And you're confident that the screening of windows and balconies, according to the conditions that would be put on this, would make the overlooking problem, well, it would address the overlooking problem in a satisfactory way, according to the Res Code guides.
Thank you. So again, through you, Madam Chair, there are recommended conditions in the recommendation in Condition 1 that specifically relate to overlooking, where I had some concerns that the plans weren't that clear. Now, Condition 1B specifically mentions the third floor habitable room windows and terraces. To be clear, I believe that it could potentially be amended to state and the second floor balconies, just to be really clear that the second floor balconies are screened as well, because it's shown a little bit inconsistently between the floor and elevation plans. So the condition at the moment probably is sufficient to cover it, because we do also have our catch-all condition at 1C. However, if we want to be really clear and give Mr. Moritz some certainty, we could amend Condition 1B to say the second and third floor habitable room windows. Thank you.
One follow-up?
I've still got a little bit more. I just want to make sure that we don't forget to do that. In terms of Mr. Moritz's studio on the top of the building, on the first floor of the building at the back, has that been counted as a habitable space in terms of the assessment of whether the I suppose the interference in terms of sunlight overshadowing and overlooking of the proposal? Does that treat it as a fully habitable room, or is that not appropriate somehow?
Thank you again, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, this window was taken into consideration as a habitable room window in doing my res code calculations. So I can confirm that the daylight to existing window standard would be met in relation to that window.
Are you finished, Councillor Brand? Can I?
Almost finished. And the res code profile, it fits the rear of the proposal does fit into the res code quite comfortably in the res code profile, I note there. One last question I just want to ask about looking at comparing the west elevation with the east elevation. So that's the west elevation in TP 10 version B and TP 11 version B. If you look at the west elevation and look at the res code profile to the north, which is towards Mr. Cyrus's property, the breaches of the res code profile mainly two awnings, which you can see sticking out horizontally, and one sort of bulkhead which probably is a planter box sticking the most prominent intrusion into the res code profile is that planter box on the second floor. Oh no, it's a planter box for the balcony on the top floor, really, I suppose. Can you see what I mean there? That it sticks out into beyond the profile, going north. Have we got? Okay, if you look at the east elevation, that protrusion into the res code profile isn't shown from the other direction, but it should be shown, you'd think. And I'm just wondering what's happened to it, or why the two elevations with their res code profiles aren't consistent with each other. If we go by the east elevation, everything looks hunky-dory. If we go by the west elevation, there's a part of it which actually is, it is a significant intrusion into the res code profile.
So through you, Madam Chair, I'm just looking at the plans to try and work out why that is. Now, there is a slight slope to the site which may, but that would explain some of the discrepancy there. So that, off the top of my head, I think is potentially what has happened.
Okay, that's a plausible thing. That the lower the ground is, in effect, the higher the building is as you get towards one end or the other. But then it would really be a matter of where the res code profile fell on the building, where that actual balcony structure, let's say that it is, or planter box actually is. Whereas the res code profile here is drawn for the front of the property here, maybe, and at the back of the property on the other one. And it would be good to know where it was actually relevant to the actual planter box structure and how long that is. And I'll just have a little look myself, see if I can tell. It's quite long.
Councillor, if it assists, I would take you to section BB. That is on sheet TP12. And if you go back to the plan view, any of the elevations, you'll see section BB marked on the various elevations, and that will show you, will give you an indication of where the planters sit, and they occur to the front and rear of the site, as my understanding. And then around the lift shaft is a slightly different roof profile coming down, which accounts for the different views one sees looking from a street or from a rear. What you're seeing there is perhaps the drawings aren't quite clearly delineated enough, but there's two different profiles that you're seeing looking through there.
I can't find that section line, I'm afraid.
Councillor, section BB is on drawing TP12. It's towards the end of the package.
I've got TP12. Well, sorry, this is a drawing of the section. Okay, and where does that section line go through?
Oh, you found it. Yes.
I'll go back to where we were.
And then plan view. Sorry to reach across you. And plan view BB is coming through here.
Okay.
So we have a different roof profile here at the lift, and then we have BB coming through here where those planters are. And what you're seeing from the street is this sort of thing is coming through.
Is that not the planter?
That's below.
This is the one that's sticking into the
top. Yeah, this is sort of combined wall and roof all in one. This is angled.
Oh God!
And that's angled. What you're seeing.
Yes.
Here, sorry, is angled. This,
okay.
And it changes.
I'm talking about this bit here, right? Which is 4.1 metres from the 4.5 metres from the boundary.
Okay, so you're on the north side here.
Yes.
Okay. So
it's this one here, all right?
Yep, another terrace there. Okay.
So there needs to be a section through there to show whether that's inside the res code profile or not.
I think we can
here
take it from here, but
it's not. But on the other side, it says that it is.
That possibly, but you're looking at this profile here, Councillor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
This is a service.
So, again, just because this is
Yes.
coming out more, whereas here it's coming
That's
in,
right.
so I think that's why it
Sorry.
complies here and it doesn't.
We're all interested in this. I'm just
Okay.
wondering
Yeah,
why.
no,
we
I'm just
can't-
waiting for they to clarify and then
Okay.
get back.
Yep.
So could you, Ms Pound or Mr Guttridge, explain that discrepancy to us all?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think if looking at TP8, which is the third floor plan, you see that on the eastern half of the site, the terrace comes out closer to the north boundary, whereas the terrace in the eastern half of the site, the rear terrace, doesn't project so far. So when you look at the rear elevation, it looks to comply, and when you look at the front elevation, there's the terrace which projects further, and that's what doesn't comply. So you can see the extent of non-compliance relates to the plan to bed associated with apartment 301.
Okay, thank you. So I believe Councillor Voss has some questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to talk about Mr Suria's questions, in that he stated that the building occupies too much of the site. I wanted to understand what the site coverage is. I think we understand that, but what's the objective and what's the standard, please? Can you answer that one?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the site coverage objective is to respect existing and preferred neighbourhood character and respond to the features of the site. And the standard B8 is that site cover should be less than 60%. So in this application, the site coverage is shown as being at about 58.5%. I have checked that as well as rechecking the permeability and confirmed that that's approximately correct. So it does meet the standard. In terms of meeting the objective in this case, I'm satisfied that the objective is met because there are a large number of apartments in this street, so there isn't a pattern of larger open yards or a lower site coverage that you would certainly find in some other streets in the area. Thank you.
Councillor Voss.
Thank you. And another question around the private open space for each apartment, assuming primarily the balconies. Does that meet the standards?
And some of this is touched on in the report, through you, Madam Chair, on page 35 at paragraphs 12.55 and 12.56. Basically, the balconies and terraces all comply with the standards. However, there are some non-compliances in relation to the courtyards, so the ground level areas, and that's because the Res Code standard states that for a ground level courtyard you need to have at least 40 square metres. Now, some of these courtyards are less than that. They're between 20 and 73 square metres, so there is some non-compliances due to the courtyards not being 40 square metres. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Brand?
Just back to this protruding balcony, which I'm focusing on just for context because I think it's probably the main breach of the profiles that we see anywhere around the building. Can you tell me in the house to the north, which I believe is Mr. Sirris's, I just want to confirm that one, at 78A to the north, is there any way showing whether the what sort of windows are there on that south-facing part of the house that would be possibly looking up at this balcony, which might possibly be causing some visual bulk question?
Thank you. So, through you, Madam Chair, at the ground floor there is a garage, and then at the first floor there are 3 first-floor habitable room windows facing towards the site. Now, you can see those on TP06. Now, they haven't been shown on the third floor plan, but just comparing them, it appears that the front two habitable room windows would be located, the first window would be partly located adjacent to the terrace, and then the second middle window would be located adjacent to that terrace. So they're first floor windows at 78A. And again, just to state that I have assessed them against the daylight to existing windows standard and that they do comply.
Okay, so I was just going to ask you that. I just want to confirm, though, that middle window is the one that would be the most affected. And so what, just say this is the one, say this were the one outstanding non-compliance, what amenity would that affect? What amenity standards would that affect? There'd be, what's relevant to that most affected window, I suppose, that you would look at if you were trying to assess the planning impact of that balcony intrusion into the Res Code profile?
Thank you. And again, through you, Madam Chair, so as I said before, the daylight to existing window standard is definitely met. The key non-compliance would be for the side and rear setback standard, as you've picked up. So, in my opinion, because it's only a small part of the terrace or planter box that would protrude, it wouldn't appear unreasonably bulky, which is something we can consider under the side and rear setback objective. And being planted as well will add some softness to the appearance of it. So it really comes back to the side and rear setback standard.
And my last question would be, I just want to look at the plan that has that balcony on it at that level. Which one am I looking at of the proposal? I think I'm looking at TP08. It's a question of whether that terrace and its planter box could be set back further without too much. It's probably the most pleasant part of the whole development, I've got to say, that terrace. But it is potentially having some deleterious effect on the northern neighbour.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, they could grade that back, and yes, that would result in a loss to the area of that terrace. However, they would still comply with the private open space standard in relation to that terrace, because they have actually two terraces for that dwelling. So even if it did result in the loss of some of the area, the other standard would be met.
Councillor Voss.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to take up Mr McGeck's point in that the design and massing of the fourth storey doesn't satisfactorily respond to the streetscape scale and character, in that you can still see the fourth storey. Just wondering how you got to the position that that is acceptable, and you're prepared to endorse that.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, this is addressed under the neighbourhood, under the height and massing section of the report, which starts on page 29 and goes to page 30, particularly at paragraphs 12.14 through to 12.16. So, first of all, while there are 2- and 3-storey developments immediately adjacent to this property, there are 2 examples of 4-storey apartment buildings in the street. What this proposal has done that the previous proposal didn't do is set back the 4th storey additionally from the ground floors. So the original proposal, you would have seen a sheer 4-storey built form, which was not considered to be responsive to the 2- and 3-storey built form on either side, or responsive to clause 21052, which does give some specific direction around what height you should be. Now, this proposal has set back the upper floor between 2.4 and 4.4 metres beyond the lower floors, as well as using a different material. So the combination of those 2 factors means that the building would present to the street as a 3-storey building with a recessed 4th storey, as opposed to the previous proposal, which would have appeared as a bulky 4-storey proposal. Thank you.
Now, are there any other questions, councillors, of the officers? So, councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Copsey?
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Do we have a second for the recommendation? Councillor Voss. Thank you. So Councillor Copsey has moved it, and we have a seconder, Councillor Voss. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak to the recommendation or motion?
I'll just close.
Councillor Voss.
I am happy to support this application. I think that the additional amended plans circulated prior to the hearing coming up has significantly addressed the issues that the first ones had. In particular, the setbacks have been increased, better outcomes, a recessive upper floor, the permeability meets the standard, as well as the site coverage. So, as well as all the other issues that we've just gone through, I'm happy to support it.
Is there any other councillor who wants to speak for or against this motion? Councillor Bond.
Yeah, I'm not going to support this motion, and would like to flag that in the event this fails, I'll put forward an alternate motion for refusal. Won't be supporting on the grounds it is an overdevelopment of the site, the building height's too high, side and rear setbacks are insufficient and breach res code, and I've still got question marks over the site permeability.
Would any other councillors? Councillor Brand.
I think I'd like to propose an amendment to it. I'm not quite sure how to do that. Just by doing
yes.
it. Okay.
So, would you like to talk through that amendment first, and then see if Councillor Copsey is amenable to it?
It would be to first of all clarify point 1B that applies to the first floor balcony as well, or is the second floor balcony? Second floor value. That's just a minor amendment to that, but also that the third floor balcony be set back to comply with the res code profile. on the north side. Basically, this bit.
Okay, so do I have Councillor Copsey? Would you allow that, or would I have a seconder for the motion for that
I'll
amendment?
seek the officer's advice, but I think the first amendment's probably just a clarification. The second is probably substantive, and we may have to vote on whether that's accepted to become a substantive motion.
Okay, so the first part is a clarification, which you are in support of, the officers. And so, Councillor Brand, you will need a seconder for the second part of your amendment. Councillor Voss?
Yes, can I please have a clarification on exactly the words of the amendment, please? Is it 1C and B, habitable windows on the second and third floor to be screened? Is that it?
No,
Was that it, Councillor Brand?
no, I haven't. No, that's.
Is there an officer recommendation for what would clarify it?
articulate.
Ms Pound? Councillor Brand, Ms Pound has got a suggestion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you could simply add the words after the second and. So it would say the second and third floor, etc., etc. So
This is for the setback of the
for this.
balcony.
My apologies. Yes, you could say the north-facing terrace of apartment 301 setback to comply with standard B17.
So is that the second part to Councillor Brand's amendment? Okay.
Sure. Yes, sure.
Could you repeat
Yeah,
that again,
absolutely.
Ms Pound?
Thank you. So it would be a new condition. It would become IJ. Sorry, condition 1J. They would probably grade it back.
So I just want to clarify, Councillor Brand, is that suitable? Oh, hang on.
17.
That is certainly the intent of what I was saying, yeah. I was just trying to clarify with the officer whether, if
Does that
that's,
seem-
I suppose the optimal way of saying it, if there's a, I mean, if a tiny bit of it went over, it wouldn't be the end of the, but to substantially comply with it would be what my aim would be.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it's probably just easier to say setback to comply, because if you say improved or use more open language, it would be more uncertainty for the residents.
So, Councillor Brand, you're moving that?
I'm happy with that, and I'll be moving that.
And do I have a seconder? Councillor Voss?
Happy to second those two items.
Oh, both of them? Well, the first one was allowable, wasn't it? Let me seek advice. Can Councillor Voss second both parts, or do we just allow? Just seeking clarification. We are asking for it.
It's preferable to have somebody else.
It's preferable to have somebody else. So is there another seconder for this? So, Councillor Voss, are you still happy to second the first amendment? And then I'm seeking a seconder for the second amendment.
No,
No, this is where it gets confusing, isn't it?
no, I seconded the first motion. This is
Yes.
an amendment, so I can't second the amendment.
Okay, so I'm seeking the amendment. So, Councillor Baxter, you'll be the seconder. All right, Councillor Brand, would you like to speak to that amendment?
Yes. Look, this is a very big building, and it's not a building that I particularly like to live next door to. But I think with it complies with it so fully complies, so closely complies to all of the standards, except for this one part, that I think if this one part is altered slightly as per my amendment, we've got a building which is really, we could say, is fully compliant with all of the standards for building development in the suburbs of the city of Port Phillip. And whether we like it or not, I think we'd prefer not to live next door to it, but it is what we have to put up with. And it's for a good cause, you know. I mean, it is important that we densify the city, and this is doing it without actually any significant breach of the planning guidelines with this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, look, I'll support this amendment because I think it makes the officer's recommendation a better one, so that if that gets up, I think that would be a better outcome. But personally, I am not in favour of this recommendation in general, so I'm really only voting for the amendment to make the officer's recommendation slightly better. And I'll talk a little bit more on that when we come to the substantive.
Are there any other councillors that would like to speak for or against the amendment? If not, I will put the amendment to the vote. Oh no, Councillor Brand, you get to close on an amendment?
It's pretty closed, I think.
All right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, so that the amendment has passed. So now we'll go back to the substantive recommendation. Oh, I do need to seek clarity around the addition of the second and third floor. Do we need to debate that? That's decided, okay. All right, so we're going back. So, Councillor Brand, you have moved to... No, Councillor Copsey, sorry, you would like to speak to... Or you were just going to close on this? Or would you like to speak now that there's been an amendment? Yeah, I'm going to get that. I'm just checking because I'm allowed... This is the amendment has come through. All right, so are there any other councillors who would like to speak? Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, cool. So I'll now speak on the substantive motion. So that while I do think that this is an improvement on the officer's recommendation, I will be voting against it because I do believe that this is an overdevelopment of the site. I do want to be clear though. This is not sort of rampant NIMBYism. Westbury Street is actually ripe for density. It makes sense to have that there. It's close to transport corridors, but I do think that the way that this application has gone about it, in terms of the massing and the height, the way that it still has issues with setbacks and permeability, means that while we have seen a vastly improved application than from when I first saw it, I'm still not sure that it's actually quite there yet, so I don't think that I will be supporting this overall.
Is the phone off now? Yep, great. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak to the for or against the motion? Councillor Brand.
No, basically just to repeat it for the other properties, for instance at the back, I understand the angst there as well, but I think there is no measure that we can apply that would prevent that we can show that this proposal is anything out of the ordinary from every other development in this sort of in this sort of suburban situation, according to Res Code, and I'm afraid that there's I can't see any reason to vote against it on the grounds that I think it is now basically fully compliant.
Are there any other councillors wishing to speak? If not, I would turn to Councillor Copsey to close.
It's been said by Councillor Brown and Voss, so I just echo their comments that I think that this proposal has responded to the complaints and concerns that have been raised, and that through conditions an acceptable outcome will be achieved.
So I will now put the motion. All those in favour? That motion has passed. Sorry? All those against? Sorry, that motion has passed. Thank you. Councillor Bond has called for a division. All those in favour of the motion, Councillor Copsey, Councillor Brown, Councillor Voss, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Simic. All those against, Councillor Bond, Councillor Pearl, Councillor Baxter. All right, so we'll be moving on to the next item, which is 6.2, which is 10 to 18 Jacka Boulevard. Could someone get Councillor Gross back in, please? Oh, is he? Okay. All right. So we're moving right along to item number 6.2. So we only have one person requesting to speak, and that is the applicant, Phil Gleeson. So if you could take the seat, please, and state your name and suburb. Do I need to announce that? Just before you start, Mr. Gleeson, apparently I need to say that Councillor Gross has returned and we have lost Councillor Copsey. So please continue, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors. My name is Phil Gleeson. I'm from Urbis and we're based in Melbourne. So I'm here tonight on behalf of the permit applicant to discuss this application with respect to the Captain Baxter tenancy at the St Kilda Sea Bars. So in summary, we obviously support the recommendation that's been made to the councillors this evening to support this particular permit application. I think probably from the councillors' perspective, there's three main items that need some consideration from the councillors in terms of consideration of this application. One is, I guess, the acoustic impacts of the proposal, and that being to remove part of the roof and to create an open terrace within this particular tenancy. The application that was put forward to the council did include a comprehensive acoustic report, and the officer's recommendation does make a number of recommendations and conditions to ensure that those recommendations are actually fulfilled as part of the operation, and we fully support the recommendations that have been made as part of that report to the council this evening. Secondly is, I guess, heritage. It is quite clearly evident through the report that's been prepared and the advice received from Council's own heritage advisor. And if I can turn the councillors to section 9 of the report, I've only got an extract here, but I think it's on page 92 of the report that's being made, and under 9.1 there's the council own heritage advisor comments. And if I can turn the councillors to the, I guess, midpoint of that assessment, which reads, so in short, the current sea bars has no real heritage value. It follows that the changes proposed to the building will not have any impact upon the heritage values of the place, or even an appreciation of what the original building may have looked like, as the balconies are not a faithful representation of the details of that building. Whether or not I've got an opportunity to do so, but I do actually have some photos or historic photos of the St Kilda Sea Bars, which demonstrate, I guess, the...
Thank you.
I've got actually a third copy there. So there's 3 photos that I'm providing up here, which are historic photos of the C-bars, which clearly demonstrate that, I guess, the location of where these works are, and I'm particularly here talking about the changes to the balustrades that are being proposed, that even in 1987, the C-bars themselves in its current form didn't exist. The current C-bars, as we know it today, was constructed in approximately about 1996 to 1998. I guess I'm really supporting, obviously, the internal heritage comments that the C-bars themselves, besides the turrets to Jacka Boulevard, really has no heritage value. And the works, or the proposed works proposed as part of this application, aren't impacting that, I guess, primary facade of the C-bars, which is the only element that does have any heritage significance. The third aspect is obviously then the signage that's proposed as part of the application. So this application proposes some illuminated business identification signage at the entry to the Captain Baxter tenancy. There is an existing small blade sign that is current, and that's actually the existing blade sign is actually shown on the plans at TP06, and on the image in the left corner shows the small entry blade sign. So this proposal is really then just seeking to, I guess, further enhance the business identification signage to the tenancy. It is obviously quite a small sign that's existing, and we just think that is a better outcome for the benefit of that particular operation. I also wish to highlight to the council there were no objections to this application. This has been on public notice, and I think we're all aware there's been some sensitivities around the C-bars in the past, and I do take comfort that there have been no objections to this application. So not only from the community, but also there's been no objection from any of the existing tenants within the C-bars. And on that note, I guess the operator of the Captain Baxter tenancy is the same operator as the Republica tenancy downstairs. They're one of the same in terms of their operation. So with that, I encourage this council to support the officer's recommendation that's been made forward.
Thank you. Now, do councillors have any questions of Mr Gleeson? Councillor Brand.
Just concerning the balconies, would there have been any, I'm just wondering, I don't know how to phrase this, your client has chosen to put clear glass balustrades there. Would there be any reason against having wrought iron balustrades there?
Through you, Madam Chair. To be honest, Councillor, I don't have that instruction to I guess, provide a clear answer on that from a client point of view. I guess if it's any consolation, I guess the intent of the changes to those balconies, they're quite heavy set, and whether or not you've actually been in the Captain Baxter tenancy, it's in an amazing location with wonderful water views, and they're actually somewhat hindered by those heavy set balustrades that are there. So the notion of actually having glazing is really about trying to improve the outlook and benefit of those users of the tenancy. So whether or not that solution that you're putting forward still achieves that outcome, I'm not sure, but I'm not really in a position to say otherwise.
Any other questions of Mr Gleeson? No.
Cheers.
Thank you, Mr Gleeson. So, councillors, do we have any questions regarding this application for the officers? No? Is that you rubbing your nose, Councillor Brand, or you have a question? No, we're moving on. So, councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Bond to move and Councillor Voss to second. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Voss, would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Brand.
Sorry. No, I'm just... This is where we're meant to be expressing our insights and opinions and what we value in our city. And I do think this is a very strange situation where we have a heritage building with no heritage value, a heritage property with no heritage value in the physical building. I accept all of that. I accept that there's really nothing. There's nothing that we could possibly object to, at least technically, on this. I would just appeal to the idea that maybe you could, as the representative of your client, you could take home the idea that they may like to reconsider the placement of plain glass balustrades there with say black wrought iron ones in a more Spanish style, which would actually continue the story and the flavour that the imagery of the sea baths started and still persists on the site. And it'd be just as visible. In fact, in many ways, it's more visible through the glass because the glass will need constant cleaning to keep the salt scale off it. And also, it's much more visible inwards as well because it doesn't reflect light. I think it'd be a better solution, more in keeping with the building, less maintenance, and a better overall result. But we have no way of enforcing that, so I'm just saying it as a suggestion. Apart from that, everything else I'm happy with, and I'm happy that everybody is happy with.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the motion? If not, I will now put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried unanimously. So moving along to 6.3, which the Planning Permits Delegate Report. So we have no members of the public wishing to speak to this. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers regarding this report? Any questions, though, before Councillor Gross is happy to move? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Simic. So, Councillor Gross, would you like to speak to the report? No, thank you. Councillor Simic? No, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Well, then I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. So there are no items of urgent business, so we will move on to confidential matters. So, councillors, we do have one confidential item relating to 41 to 49 Bank Street, South Melbourne, which is a matter before VCAT. So I do need to close the meeting. I now call on a councillor to move that the meeting be closed to members of the public.